Remotely City Center Radio is episode 400, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Monday, August 11th, 2025. What's up, everyone? I hope you had an amazing weekend and you have a great week ahead. Welcome back to the program. So happy to be with you. I hope you enjoyed the last, I think it was 3 episodes in a row, which were interviews. I think they all were pretty interesting and got some good feedback on some of them. So thank you all for listening, and apologies for, not having our normal 3 episodes last week. But things were a little busy, not just with the normal stuff, but also I was preparing for and then took a trip. In fact, I'm recording this on the road, as it were, in my home state of Connecticut, spending some time with my family. I actually wasn't in Connecticut for the majority of the time, though. I flew home and then headed up to New Hampshire, another beautiful state in New England. I hadn't been there since, I think, leading into maybe my senior year of high school. We were trying to figure out the last time my family took a trip there, and it was awesome. Of course, being with my family is always a lot of fun. I was with my mom and dad, and then my brother, sister-in-law, and my niece and nephew. So we drove up. Thankfully, I was in my parents' RV on the trip up, so I got to do a little bit of work and relax and hang out with their dog, while my brother and his family were in their car with not quite as many luxuries as I had. But once we got there, my parents went to a campground, and then I had a hotel room, which was adjacent to my brother's family's hotel rooms. We had adjacent doors, so we could open those up, and the kids could hang out in my room, or I could go over there, and so that was a lot of fun. But no, New Hampshire was beautiful. I'm sure it looks amazing in the winter as well, but no thank you to all that snow and ice, especially because we were in the White Mountain region of New Hampshire, which gets particularly chilly and wintry. But we, it's still a fun place to be in the summer, despite the fact that you would think most people would go there, with the mountains, that it's going to be skiing and all that. But there's actually a ton of state parks. I'm sure there's some federal parks as well, but we were checking out all the state parks, and, just some fun. If you've ever been to a mountain town, say maybe like Asheville, you know how funky and interesting they can be. And this area certainly is unique, and we had a blast. We went to some parks like the Lost River, something called the Flume Gorge, which is part of the, I think it's Franconia State Park system. I think that's the name of it. Forgive me for forgetting already the names of these places. An area called the Basin, and it just is beautiful, huge rocks and, water flowing. And, so some areas, these rocks are so smooth because for, hundreds of years, thousands of years, millions of years, water has been running through these areas. And I'm not going to dive into the history, for millions of years ago and how glaciers and, how they melted and created this area. You can look it up if you are so inclined, but it's created some beautiful just areas. I mean, nature is just incredible, as you all know. We have some pretty cool things in Charleston, but not a whole lot of mountains. So just a different vibe, and the weather was perfect. We lucked out, and we had a lot of fun. And again, just beautiful, beautiful state parks. And it was so fun being with my family and just, walking along these paths and checking out things, taking pictures. One area, the Lost River, has a bunch of like rock formations and, little caves and stuff that you can go into. And some of them are a bit of a tight squeeze. But it was fun to be there, especially with the kids, just, seeing how much they enjoyed it and goofing around with them. And it was great. We also went to a place called Clark's Trading Post, which is wild, just a wild place that we used to go to when we were kids. Their main attraction is that they have bears that do like performances, and they've been doing these for decades. It's run by the Clark family. So we got to see these bears doing these, these like silly little tricks and things. And they have other stuff. Like there's a train ride you can take. It's very short, and they have like a water slide for kids and bumper boats and on and on and on. And, it's this really weird but unique and fun place, and we had a blast. So that was why I've been MIA from the podcast, just enjoying a little short summer vacation. But when you're hearing this, I will either be back or on my way back to Charleston, but certainly had a blast here in New England. But enough about me. We got lots to get caught up on, including a big political sex scandal that has been talked about in the Charleston area specifically. So let's get into that first. So on Saturday, August 2nd, so over a week ago now, Charleston County School Board member Michelle Lieber publicly called out her husband, State Senator Matt Lieber, for alleged infidelity with a political consultant. If you were unfamiliar with the Liebers, they are MAGA conservatives. Matt himself has a very, let's say, interesting background, where he was a self-proclaimed member of this fringe, violent right-wing group. You can look it up online. He also has an arrest record that isn't so great. You can also look up that information and stories that have been posted about it. And his wife does not have those things in her background. However, she is a very huge MAGA supporter, and her getting on the school board was definitely not a good thing, as she's one of these Moms for Liberty, as Matt is as well, Moms for Liberty backed candidates. So yes, there's a little bit of schadenfreude, or however that is pronounced, with this story. But these are the types of things that we used to see that could harm political careers. Affairs used to end careers. It seems quaint now, because, well, it seems like nothing can end some political careers. But this is definitely a big story. And it's not just a big story because, there's someone in politics who cheated on their wife, allegedly. But it's also because these are not just MAGA candidates, but these are the types of Republicans who boast their family values, and they talk about how, all these things are degrading the family system, and then, look, it's actually you and your actions that are doing those things. So in any event, in a since-deleted Facebook post, Michelle Lieber posted several text exchanges, which apparently took place between her husband and a political strategist whose name is Rebecca Madsen, who she referred to as, quote, his whore, end quote. So, I mean, don't get me wrong, I certainly understand being upset finding out your spouse cheated on you, but airing that dirty laundry and name-calling, well, although I could certainly understand the instinct to want to do that, also is a little questionable, especially since you are a Charleston County School Board member. So no one's really looking great in this, which is not to say that, I'm not trying to put blame on Michelle Lieber for what her husband did, but, again, you got to show a little bit more discretion when you're, someone who's in politics and a school board member at that. So according to Fitz News, Lieber has paid Madsen approximately $4,750 from his campaign account since December of 2023. And these are for various services, including political consulting and campaign labor. So obviously, who knows when this supposed affair started, but it also, of course, it's going to raise questions when you're paying someone on your campaign staff that you then become romantically involved in, regardless of if it's an affair or not. So there's that side of things, which we'll get back to in a moment. But back to Michelle, in addition to all those posts, now she has deleted, if not all, some of them. She also changed her marital status on Facebook to separated, which no surprise there. The subsequent posts I mentioned, made further reference to not just the affair, but she also claimed that Madsen has had affairs with other married women. She claims that she might also have blackmail on others, and then said that divorces, plural, are coming. Madsen's husband has referenced they were already separated when he was asked about all this stuff, but said that the reason their marriage kind of fell apart was because he basically alluded to affairs being the reason for it. So again, this is all alleged. How do you have proof of these things? But it certainly seems to be true based on the screenshots and one of the pictures that I was unfortunately not prepared to see of Matt Lieber on Fitz News' website. It's not super salacious, but not great. Not something I wanted to see. So there's that whole side of things. Okay, big, scandal, whatever. Some people are going to care, some don't. We know the current political climate and how some people will be like, well, that's not great, but I'm never going to vote for a Democrat. So Matt Lieber all the way, or keep Michelle Lieber on the school board. Despite that, there have been petitions saying that both should resign or be removed from their positions based on their respective actions. Again, whether you think that's fair for Michelle or not, someone who finds out their husband is cheating and then makes a quick decision to post about it on Facebook. I mean, who amongst us wouldn't possibly think of that? But again, she's in a political position on a county school board. You got to be a little bit smarter about posting these kinds of things. Now, there's more fallout, though. Fitz News is talking about how this has opened the door, for whatever reason, to look into Matt Lieber's campaign finances, not just his payments to Madsen, but they're also looking into his personal finances and his connections to several other South Carolina elected officials and special interests. Fitz News says they're looking into it, but they claim, without proof, that others are asking these types of questions and looking into it, meaning maybe some other politicians and things. So this affair could have further fallout depending on what some of those finances and things say. We'll see. Obviously, a big story because, yes, it's salacious. But again, this used to be the type of thing that would sink up, not just like the current political position of someone, but their career. And it'll be interesting to see what voters or people who have the ability to, encourage them to resign or potentially remove them, what they end up doing. This is 100% something that we will be keeping an eye on. All right, sticking with politics, less salacious. We've had a flurry of announcements over the last week. We've got Nancy Mace officially jumped into the governor's race. No surprise there. She touted that she was Trump in high heels and had some weird post with her with the gun for some reason as well. But there was some fallout because she said she was open to tough questions and would debate anyone and, talked about how she'll fight and she's so brave and blah, blah, blah. But she said this at an event where any dissenters or people who, maybe were going to protest or, not even, yes, I get maybe if people have signs and they're being disruptive, having them removed. But she had other people removed from this event, whether it was, I'm saying it was really someone from her campaign, but, your campaign staff represents you. And there's video going around of someone claiming to be on her staff saying that the event was a private event, when people were objecting to being kicked out. Well, it was not a private event. There were tickets available online. They were free. They were open to anyone. So that was a lie. Now, again, I can certainly understand if people are disrupting a talk, having them removed. Sure, you can protest and whatnot, but, come on. You got to let the person who's making an announcement get through what they're doing. Let them do their thing. But people who, maybe like lightly booed or just were there and, they felt uncomfortable if they weren't, vocally supporting her is what some people said. But the bigger issue here is those people who really weren't causing any disturbances and were removed. So a reporter asked her about it afterwards from NBC News, the national NBC News, asked her like, hey, you said all this stuff about answering tough questions, but then when people who would ask you tough questions or dissented from some of the things you said, you had them removed. She claimed, well, people disrupting me talking should be removed. And again, I get that. And she said some people said some vile and horrible things. I haven't heard or seen proof of that. I'm not saying it's not true. And if it is true, again, certainly understand that. And the NBC reporter said the same to her. Basically the reporter was like, oh, no, completely. I hear you on that. That's a completely different scenario. But what about people who weren't doing that? And then Mace attacked the reporter, saying that the reporter was a Democrat and yada, yada, yada. So not a great start for her. The headlines weren't the best. When you're seeing headlines like Mace says she's open to tough questions at event where dissenters were removed. Not great for her. But nonetheless, she did announce that she is running for governor. Meanwhile, another conservative MAGA Republican did the same. That's Representative Ralph Norman, who represents the 5th District currently. He also announced he's going to jump into the 2026 South Carolina governor's race. He has been a pretty big supporter of President Trump. There's been very few instances where he has kind of strayed from that path. And when he has, it's not that big of a deal. Like, for instance, he was a big supporter of former Governor Nikki Haley. He supported her in this most recent election in the primary, rather, that Trump ultimately won over Haley. So, he has shown a little bit once in a while he'll go against Trump, but Now that Trump is in office, he's been a pretty big Trump sycophant. I mean, he knows he has to be, in order to have a chance in this state, at least in the primary. But this whole he dissents sometimes is not really, something that you should read too much into. I mean, again, he's going to back Trump as long as Trump is in office. And he's very much in line with a lot of MAGA, policies and, what they believe in. And then you can see that from his voting record, some of the things he said online, the fact that he's a member of the House Freedom Caucus, which is the chamber's most conservative caucus. And according to govtrack.us, he is traditionally ranked as the state's most conservative U.S. House member and among the top most conservative members nationwide. And this is based on his legislative activity. So, again, don't read too much into, people who are saying, oh, no, he's not afraid to stand up to Trump, because it's not entirely true. Another just, hey, this guy's the coolest, obviously being sarcastic. During the COVID pandemic, he, along with some other representatives, including Thomas Massey of Kentucky and Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia, were fined $500 apiece for not wearing face coverings on the House floor, which was a requirement at the time. Doesn't care about his colleagues, potentially getting them sick. So he's one of those type of people. They ultimately sued the then House Speaker, Democrat Nancy Pelosi, but they lost on appeal over the incident and had to pay the fine. So that's the kind of guy we're talking about here. So don't be fooled by this narrative of, oh, he might break from Trump. He's very much in line with him. Another campaign has ended. We've seen some campaigns be announced and end quickly. Lee Johnson, a Democrat who said he was going to run against Lindsey Graham, for instance, now, within a couple of months, it announced his campaign was over. And we have another Graham challenger doing the same. This was a bigger name, though. It was former South Carolina Lieutenant Governor Andre Bauer. He announced that he is suspending his primary challenge to Senator Lindsey Graham. He put posts on social media this past Friday that said he decided to end his campaign, quote, after deep prayer and reflection. He went on to say that he believed, quote, we must stop tearing one another down with lies and division, end quote. I mean, yeah, I agree with him there, but I don't know why that means you're ending your campaign. And also, great, but we all know that's not happening, especially with the current MAGA-focused Republican Party. As for, is he endorsing anyone? No, he did not endorse any of the remaining candidates or Lindsey Graham, for that matter. Who knows if he will? But yes, his campaign is over. I was kind of surprised because, was he going to beat Lindsey Graham? Probably not. But he had a chance. He had a name that was well recognized in the state. He has also been a strong supporter of Trump, which again is very important, especially since Lindsey Graham, although, most of us would say, look, he's a big Trump sycophant. He has at times broken with Trump, but not significantly enough for some people, but for some MAGAs, he's done it enough that they would love to send someone else to Congress over him. Now, they would never vote for a Democrat, of course. And I thought, because of that, Andre Bauer might be the one. But less than 40 days in, his campaign's suspended. So another person has dropped out, and it's looking, at least on the primary at this time, Graham is not going to face any significant challenge. But we'll see what ends up happening if someone jumps in or something changes. But it looks like it'll be him going up against whoever the Democratic nominee will be. And our last story is another update. We talked about a previous episode about the John C. Calhoun monument that was removed from Marion Square back in 2020, how that is going to be put back on display. However, it will not be in the city limits of Charleston. This is all based on a lawsuit brought by this lame group called the American Heritage Association, which basically just fights to keep statues of racists, traitors to this country. They want to keep those statues up. They just love them for some reason. So they were fighting for another monument that was removed, and this was one that was commemorating Confederate General Robert E. Lee. It used to be downtown. It was removed, and after a year-long legal battle, it has been determined that the monument will be put back on display. So the monument, which is much smaller than the John C. Calhoun one. It's basically just a plaque that was on a rock, and many of you probably didn't even know it existed. But it was located on King Street in front of the Charleston Charter School for Math and Science. It was removed in July of 2021 at the request of the Charleston County School District and was placed in storage at a city warehouse located on Milford Street. That happened until late May. I don't quite know where it went from there. It doesn't seem that local reporters know either, but it's been in storage. Around that time, the local chapter of the United Daughter of the Confederacy, who originally erected the monument back in 1947, filed the lawsuit against the district with the help of that American Heritage Association group, and they took possession of the marker. Again, unclear where it was exactly when they took possession of it, but they have it. And by the way, did you catch that little piece of information? A monument to General Lee, who was a Confederate general, was put up in 1947. So no, this was not put up during the war. It was not even put up in the couple of years after the war. 1947. This goes back to what many people refuse to acknowledge, that a lot of statues and monuments to Confederate people, whether they were generals or whatever, were put up in this time frame. And it was more this whole, the South will rise again narrative, the fact that there was that belief system, and this lost cause narrative that was going on, and to put black residents kind of in their place. That's what they were trying to do by putting these monuments up and being like, hey, we might have lost this war, but we still honor these people and what they stood for. And that's a key piece when people are like, you can't erase history, which is a ridiculous argument anyway when it comes to monuments and things. But the fact that these weren't even put up in the wake of the war or during the war, these are decades later. It's insane. But anyway, that American Heritage Group provided some financial backing for these lawsuits this one was against the school district itself. And they told the Post and Courier that the Lee Monument will be re-erected in downtown Charleston, but that the new location is not being disclosed at this time. So thankfully, it's not going to be put back near the front of a school, which hopefully the school would teach, like, yeah, hey, you might see that monument, but here's the real story about this guy. So unclear where it's going to be. There's been talks that it might be Marion Square as kind of we can't get the Calhoun Monument back, but we'll put the Robert E. Lee one there. But that is unconfirmed. So we'll see what ends up happening and where it will be. By the way, the lawsuit, if you're wondering, like, how could you even create a lawsuit about this? Well, as you may know, South Carolina has this dumb piece of legislation called the Heritage Act, which provides that monuments and memorials on public grounds that commemorate American wars or Native or African American history cannot be relocated, removed, disturbed, or altered without the approval from the state legislature. Why is this dumb? Well, yes, it's nice that they threw in Native Americans and African Americans in their history, but the real reason this Heritage Act was put forth back in 2000, by the way, was specifically for the Confederate and Confederate-related monuments like the John C. Calhoun one. That's the real reason this was created, because there started to be a push from people being like, hey, why are we honoring some of the worst people in our history? Or at least, people that fought for the traitorous side during the Civil War. Why are we doing this? This doesn't make a whole lot of sense, especially because we're honoring them without even providing any historical context to who these people were. Obviously people, a certain segment of the population got upset about that. And that's why this Heritage Act was put into place. And yeah, they threw in some other stuff there to make it seem like it wasn't based on this lost cause narrative of the Confederacy, but we all know the truth. So the city, for its part, argued that the removal did not violate the Heritage Act because the marker itself was not explicitly a war memorial. Ultimately, that didn't fly, and the Lee Memorial is sadly coming back in some capacity, just like the Calhoun Monument. And by the way, for whatever it's worth, following the defeat of the Confederacy in 1865, Lee himself argued against creating monuments to the former Confederacy. He said it would, quote, keep open the sores of war, end quote. And he was right. So even the man himself said he didn't think these types of things should happen. So again, for whatever that's worth, even he opposed it. All right, that'll do it for this edition of Holy City Center Radio. Hopefully, we got you caught up on some things you may have missed. There's still plenty of things that happened, and we'll get into them on future episodes. Thank you for listening. Thank you so much to Lindsay Marie Collins with LMC Soundsystem for producing this and every episode of Holy City Center Radio. And thank you to Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each and every show. I'll be back with you later this week. I hope it's a good one for you. But until the next episode, good night and good luck.